Hello everyone, my name is Isabel Stewart and I am part of the Wave Trauma Education team. So I'm just a small part of a bigger system and I depend on lots of other colleagues and lots of other systems in order to do my job and for my survival and to thrive. So that brings me on to the topic of the talk today on resilience using a systems approach. So I'm just going to bring up some of the slides that I'm going to use. And I will move to the second one. And I love this saying that the lessons always come before the blessings. And it sort of sums up for me the whole definition of post-traumatic growth and resilience. So I'm sure that you're very familiar with lots of definitions about resilience and what it is, and it's about the ability to bounce back, it's the ability to adjust and adapt and to survive and thrive in spite of adversities. But I'm going to use this definition by Professor Anne Maston. And it goes, the capacity of a system to adapt successfully to challenges that threaten system function, survival, or development. And I'm just going to talk a bit about systems. So we're all embedded and dependent on other systems for our survival and for thriving. Internally, we have many systems, like our muscular system, our cardiac system, our respiratory system, and of course, which is very topical at the moment, our immune system. So that immune system has to be working and it has to be in balance in order for us to survive a virus and to, in fact, thrive. The other systems that we're embedded in and dependent on are, of course, our family system, and then we move outwards to other systems like communities, countries, and now globally. And never, I think, in my lifetime has this been more prominent and real than with the COVID-19 crisis and how dependent we are on a multitude of many other systems for our survival. So there's been a growing interest in the science of resilience, particularly since the 1970s, after people had lived through a lot of adversities, and we're looking at how some people managed to thrive and grow in spite of those challenges and traumas and adversities. So I'm going to look at some of the early pioneers of that science. And it is no coincidence that the people that I'm going to discuss all had histories of childhood adversities, and it led them into their own particular fields of study. So I'm going to start with Norman Garmese, and he fought in the Battle of the Bulge in the Second World War. And this had quite an impact on him, the whole experience of war. And he became a child developmentalist and initially studied pathology and mental health illness. And then he began to see that there was another side to this, that in spite of traumas and adversities, that people did do very well and did grow and could bounce back. Then we moved to Emmy Werner, and she was born in the Second World War in Germany. And the town that she lived in was very badly bombed. And it was only as she got older that she realized that her family, and many other people would not have survived except for the help from many other systems like aid agencies that provided food and shelter. And she became a developmental psychologist and led a very famous longitudinal study. And this study was on the island of Kauai, Hawaiian Island, and they studied children who were born in the year 1955 up until those children were 40. And what Werner realized was that in spite of many adversities that these children endured, like perinatal adversities, histories in the family of poverty, addiction, and mental health illness, that actually a third of these children, even at the age of 10, surprisingly seemed to do fairly well. So she became very interested in that. She called these group of children vulnerable but invincible, and that's a beautiful description. But they checked in on all these children periodically until they were 40. And what they also realized that was over the years, as a lot of these children got older and circumstances changed and improved, that they did bounce back, that they did fairly well in spite of their earlier experiences. And last but not least is Michael Rutter. And at the age of 7, him and his sister were evacuated from England to North America during the Blitz. After he returned to England and in later life, he became a child psychiatrist. And his focus was on pathology and again on mental illness. But he realized as well during all his experience that again, people seem to do fairly well in spite of a lot of adversities. So collectively that they realised that too much of the emphasis perhaps was on risks and pathology, and there wasn't the equal emphasis on the positives, on the growth, and on the undeniable protective factors which made a difference for many of these children. So they weren't denying the adversities, and it's equally important to pay attention to those as it is to the growth and the resilience. So there's no doubt that we have lived through and that we live currently in turbulent times, and some of those adversities and challenges have been climate change. When we think of the fires in Australia and America recently, and the floods and natural disasters like tsunamis and volcanoes, war, a lot of wars, and the current refugee crisis, and of course a lot of pandemics that there has been recently, like MERS and SARS, and now with COVID-19. And we also know much more because of study and research on adverse childhood experiences. And we know about the ACE study and how this has been replicated all over the world, and that some of the adversities that people face are poverty, inequality and injustice, toxic stress, and how some of those adversities can be chronic and long-term. But also we know much more about how these challenges impact not just our mental health, but also our physical health. And my next slide, for me, sums up what growth and resilience can be about. It's an ongoing balancing act. We're not born innately with resilience, and that's us for the rest of our lives, in spite of what happens, that it's an ongoing process that it involves many systems. So it's a balancing act. It's a bit like if you were in your car on a long journey, and you're not always in a straight line and you veer to the left or to the right. You have to correcting yourself so that you come back into balance. So there is a much better understanding, not just of risks to our physical and mental health, but also the protective factors and what promotes and encourages and develops resilience, and helps us to adjust and overcome adversities. And my last slide, it's called Ordinary Magic, and I think of resilience in terms of this, and it's a term used by Professor Anne Maston, and she has actually written a book called Ordinary Magic. So it's like resilience is ordinary magic, but it is a process, an ongoing process, and it involves many systems and not just the individual. So that's it. And next week we will have part 2 of resilience. Thank you very much for listening, and bye bye.